Good afternoon. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Business, Housing, and Zoning Committee for September 24, 2024. I'm Jamal Osman, and I'm the chair of this committee. Before we begin the meeting, I want to offer a friendly reminder to all council members, staff, and the public that this meeting are broadcast live to enable greater participation. This broadcast include real-time captioning as further method to increase the accessibility of our proceeding to the community. Therefore, all speakers need to be mindful for their speech so our captioners can fully capture and transcribe all comments of the broadcast. We ask all speakers to moderate the speed and the clarity of their comment. Colleagues, I would like to note that our agenda is very full today and we need to adjourn no later than 4 p.m. We will be using speaker management for this meeting, so please make sure you assign so you can participate in the discussion. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify a quorum.
Councilmember Rainville.
Present.
Cashman.
Present.
Jenkins is absent. Chowdhury.
Present.
Vice Chair Ellison is absent. Chair Osman.
Present.
There are 4 members present.
Let the record reflect we have a quorum. The consent agenda is before us. Items 7 through 16 are consent agenda. Item 7 is a liquor license approval for Francis Berger Joint. Item 8 is 43 liquor license renewal. Item 9 is a gambling license approval for Northeast Alliance. Item 10 is approving a debt forgiveness and underwriting a waiver for Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center. Item 11 and 12 are accepting grants for animal care and control. Item 13 is a legislative directive regarding vacancy data and strategy. Item 14 is referring to staff. The subject matter for ordinance regarding fences cleanup from the service animal, fences cleanup for the service animal. Item 15 is referring to staff. The subject matter of heritage preservation regulation ordinance. This is regulation update. Periodic regulation update. Item 16 is referring to staff. The subject matter of ordinance regarding fence heights. We also have a discussion on item 21, legislative directive related to supportive housing report that I would like to move with the consent agenda. Councilmember Rainville, as one, would like to briefly speak on that item. Would anyone like to pull any items for any question or discussion? Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you. So I did want to speak to the, I'm looking for what item number that is here. We're talking about the, can one of you guys help me on this?
Councilmember Rainville, are you referring to item number 21?
21 on the other page. There you go. Great. So, no, I'm not referring to item 21. You have me confused here, Councilmember.
That's fine if you.
Which item did I want to speak to?
I thought item 21.
No.
Okay, that's fine. But Councilmember Chowdhury.
Thank you, Chair Osman. I'll keep my remarks brief. I just wanted to highlight item number 11 and 12. I'm proud to be the council sponsor for these resolutions and just uplift the fact that we're accepting.
No, I did. Okay, I got it.
We're accepting these grants to ensure that pet owners are able to have fees for reclaiming their pet waived, and then also offset the costs for pet adoptions. This is just a really great equitable step to make sure that pets are being adopted, and then people are able to also take care of animals in our city. And I think the animal care and control team and our regulatory services department for searching for grants like this and applying for them. So just wanted to uplift that.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Rainville.
Okay, thank you. I'm back on track here. I did want to speak to item 21. This comes from Councilmember Vita and I, and it's to be proactive as more and more housing developers come to us for funding. We had a lot of discussion about Agate and pass some funding for them. But now I am getting calls already from other housing providers. They want to stand in line too. So there's got to be some process, some very transparent process where we do this instead of just quickly responding as needs come up. And that's I thank Councilmember Vita for her work on this with myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else, I will approve all consent agenda items and item 21. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it and the motion carries. Next, we have 4 public hearing. The first is for 2025 license fee schedule. I will ask Ben Zimmerman to give us that presentation. Welcome.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Osman, council members. My name is Ben Zimmerman. I'm a principal budget and evaluation analyst in the budget division, and I'm here with my colleague Osa Akpata-Tenyu to present on the 2025 license fee schedule recommendations. In terms of a roadmap for this presentation, we will be covering 2 general areas. First, a slide exploring some historical context for this annual exercise, then getting into our methodology this year, and some more on the process we undertook. Second, I will turn the presentation over to Osa, who will walk through in greater detail the 2025 license fee schedule recommendations on a department and divisional basis. So in terms of context and process, this is an annual process. The update to the license fee schedule is informed by Appendix J of the Municipal Code and coincides with the budget process. Staff conducts analysis and presents recommendations to be considered and voted on by council. Fees have received a base increase, meaning across the board to all fees on the license fee schedule, 5 times since 2010, with the last being last year at this time to be implemented in the current year, 2024. Generally, this base increase has been 1.5 to 2% across the board, with the exception of PCAR, which historically has trended higher with a 3 to 10% increase when we've done that, and some other isolated exceptions. In terms of our approach for 2025, staff is recommending a 5% base increase for 2025, again excluding PCAR, because as we saw earlier this year in a fee study, under our current PCAR enforcement, there is no room to increase fees. A note about how that base increase level was determined. The 5% increase is driven by the year-over-year increase in personnel expense budget from 2024 to 2025 for the core divisions associated with the administration or enforcement of these fees. So to that end, though this increase may look comparatively high in relation to the base increases from the past 10 to 15 years, it is in fact being recommended with the intent to maintain our revenue recovery to prevent the property taxes from shouldering the growth in these personnel costs. Second, a bit more about the methodology specifically for 2025. All recommended fee levels are rounded to the nearest dollar increment for ease of administration. Departments also had an opportunity to review the base 5% increase framework and propose alternatives. In most instances, fees moved forward with the 5% increase, but there were a few decreases, and others held flat, for example, to adhere to state and city policy. You'll see more on that when I pass it over to Osa to look at the department and divisional level. As a note about how fee studies inform our license fee schedule, we conduct fee studies to compare the costs of administration or enforcement and associated revenues. In doing so, firstly, we are ensuring the city is not over-collecting revenues, and accordingly that we are upholding the city's financial policies and state statute. Secondly, we are providing transparency to department leadership and council to inform recommendations, decision-making, and amendments. In 2018, all departments and divisions represented on the license fee schedule were evaluated via fee study. That is not a practical scale of work to undertake annually, And accordingly, beginning last year in our presentation, we focused on one department for a fee study, Reg Services, and made it our goal to rotate annually to revisit a specific department, division, or operation as relevant. To very briefly flag fee studies from recent years, again, in 2018, there was the fee study of all departments on the license fee schedule, and that outcome was a 46% recovery ratio, again, meaning 46% of admin costs were recovered via these fees. In 2023, we looked at Reg Services rental licensing and found a 60% recovery ratio. We also looked at animal care and control and found a 20% recovery ratio. Earlier this year, we looked at PCAR within health to respond to a legislative directive and found that 97% recovery ratio. And in just the past 4 to 6 weeks, we looked at CPED's transportation network companies, TNC, to help with the response to a legislative directive. That was a 193% recovery ratio. Unfortunately, with the timing of the completion of that TNC fee study being just a few weeks ago, those findings were not able to feed into the recommendations we are presenting here. Again, because this came together in early August as a part of the budget process. Later in committee today, CPED will present on TNC in response to that LD, so I would recommend deferring any detailed questions about TNC until that time when there's more in-depth information in front of you all. Lastly, we are here for the public hearing required by ordinance following the 30-day public comment period. And thank you for bearing with me on this very hefty slide, but I will pass it over now to OSA to summarize the 2025 recommendations.
Good afternoon, Chair Osman, council members. As my colleague Ben mentioned, my name is Osa Akpatatanu, and I will continue with the license fee schedule recommendation. On this slide, there's an illustration of the departments and divisions where the over 600 licenses are housed. The licenses within the fee schedule span 3 departments encompassing 5 divisions. This slide and the slides that will follow will dig into the forecasted revenue. The first column to your left specifies the department or division. The second column lists the 2025 forecast absent of any changes from the license schedule recommendation. The third column includes the projected revenue forecast based on this license fee schedule change, so it encompasses the impact of this proposed license schedule recommendation. And lastly, on the fourth column, you'll see the difference between columns 2 and 3, so the difference between the forecasted revenue without and with the impact of the recommended license fee schedule. Overall, the recommended changes to the current fee schedule would have an estimated increase of $563,000 to the forecasted 2025 revenue. To quickly walk through an example, let's look at the second row. This is CPED business licensing. The revenue forecast without incorporating this fee schedule adjustment is $7.4 million, whereas when we incorporate the impacts to the fee schedule recommendation, it brings the recommended forecast to $7.7 million, measuring a difference of $323,000 between the two forecasted figures. For the following 3 slides, the first 3 columns are the same as what I showed on the previous slide, with the fourth column here including the detail on the changes to the fees. So we see here that business licensing for 96% of the fees increased by 5%. The remaining 4% of fees were either held flat in accordance with the mandate by city ordinance or state law, or they did increase, but just by a percentage less than 5%. Moving on to health department recommendations. For PCAR, all fees were held flat. As a result, there's no change to the forecasted revenue. For FLP, 99% of the fees were increased by 5%. The 1% of fees that did not increase were the sidewalk food cart vendor, which decreased by 24%, and the mobile food vehicle vendor fees, which decreased by 17%. Both fees were decreased to better align with the restaurant fees and to better align with the health and licensing workload. Moving on to regulatory services. Rental licensing following the same general trend here. So we see 92% of fees increased by 5%. The remaining 8% accounts for the new rental licensing conversion fees that were held flat. Animal control, the majority, 94% of the fees were held flat, while 3 licenses received a 50% fee reduction with the goal of increasing adoption accessibility. I will pass the presentation back over to Ben.
Thank you, Osa. And I just have one final slide we've added this morning. So on a final note, late last week, we discovered that fees which went out for public notice as pertain to block events, parades, and races were incorrect. Since last year's annual updates to the license fee schedule were completed, additional revisions were made, as is reflected on the screenshot to the right. The top red box labeled previous fee structure reflects the fee structure from 2023 and earlier. Those were subsequently replaced by the lower green box labeled current fee structure beginning in 2024. So since these fees were updated outside of the annual process, our base file for our work that we started this year mistakenly reverted back to the old structure. So since what went out for public notice was a technical error and not an intentional proposal to revert those fees back, we are recommending and proposing that the 2025 fees not be the red box, but in fact move forward as that green box, which is what is currently being implemented here in 2024, with our recommendation just to hold those figures flat into 2025. And with that, we complete our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm going to proceed to open the public hearing, and we have the first speaker, Cisil Smith.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Cisil Smith. I am President and CEO of the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association, and I reside in Ward 1. I want to first give some context before offering my testimony on the fee increases. The Minneapolis rental market is facing serious challenges. We have endured inflationary increases in utility costs, including city-provided utilities, double-digit increases in insurance premiums, material and labor costs that skyrocketed during COVID, new and expensive security costs, and rising property taxes. We are currently averaging 0.3% annual rent growth, 0.3%, and rents are currently declining. This is an unsustainable business model. Furthermore, higher interest rates will dramatically affect the cost of debt service as loans mature at some properties in the next few years. There are 3 options. Raise the rent, which is not currently possible given the elevated vacancy rates at 7%. Cut expenses, particularly capital improvements and long-term maintenance, or dispose of the property through sale or returning it to the lender. These are all very painful and disruptive options. Given these economic headwinds, let me turn to the 10% license fee increase on large Tier 1 properties. The per-unit fee is being raised from $10 to $11. Last year, the city paused on an increase, and we would urge you to do the same. We've had to find operational savings to manage the challenges in the current market, and we would hope that regulatory services could do the same. Housing affordability, stability, and sustainability are national priorities. Please do not add to the pressure on housing affordability and sustainability by increasing per-unit fees 10%. Please continue to do the work of creating new housing and sustaining existing housing so that housing affordability continues to improve for renters. Please deliberate carefully on the structure of the funding for housing inspections and moderate the increase on large Tier 1 multifamily properties. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next person is Eric Berger.
Thank you, Chairman Osmond and board members. My name is Eric Berger, and I'm a Minneapolis resident. I am testifying to support adding the greenhouse gas CO2 to the PCAR 2025 fee schedule. Doing this is a budget-neutral way to advance the city's climate goals, and it will set a good foundation to charge polluters for the cost of their emissions. Also, last year, the City Council approved the Climate and Equity Plan, which proposes adding CO2 to the PCAR. I want Minneapolis to be a leader in fighting climate change, but it will not be if the city is not taking aggressive action to reduce CO2 emissions. I urge you to add CO2 to the PCAR 2025 fee schedule. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next speaker is Angela.
Thank you, council members. My name is Angela Hilgard. I'm here representing a small business that handles short-term vacation rental management. We're called Ministay. We actually had been part of the conversation several years ago when these fees were initially created, and brought forth the idea that the fee for a very small company such as ours that's local with, boots on the ground people, is just too high. The $7,500 fee to list properties within the city was changed down to $750, which we felt was a lot more reasonable. At this time, although looking at the numbers, they look like a small increase. For us, when I did the math, compared to where we were last time with $750, we are just over that 100 property mark, which would put us in the 5,800 fee range. For us, that's a 685% increase. As a small business, and I mean small, under 30 employees, that is nowhere to be found, right? The economy is worse than it was when the fees were instituted many years ago, and we're still in there daily doing the grind. So we're asking that you strongly consider the effect of those fees on such a small company. We love the city and love being here and promoting business within the city, and we'd like that to be able to continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? See none, I'll close the public hearing, and also I would like to recognize we have been joined by Councilmember Jenkins in the meeting. Are there any questions or anyone from the members? All right. Yes, Councilmember Chowdhury.
This might be for staff. Just taking a look at the PCAR fees that are listed here, there's a set of them that are exempted, and I kind of just wanted to get a better understanding. It's under energy, noise, and pollution.
Welcome.
Chair Osman, council members, my name is Patrick Hanlon. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Sustainability, Healthy Homes, and Environment. I oversee the PCAR program, and the Councilmember Chowdhury, the fees that you're referring to, we used to charge for those. They're pollution control equipment. And so we made the decision to not charge for equipment that we want to see in the city, so not charging for the things that are removing pollution from the air. But we do want to know where those pieces of equipment are in case there's breakdowns and we get complaints about odor or concerns about air pollution, to know where they are.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I'll ask another question related to PCAR. So I have heard about the conversation on charging with regards to CO2. I know we do carbon monoxide. Could you just share a little bit about
Sure.
the context of that conversation and where we're at?
Sure. There's a number of, Minneapolis has taken very aggressive, as you all know, very aggressive approaches to climate change, especially in this last year with our Climate Legacy initiative. It's a $10 million investment in climate change. That was funded through franchise fees it's a utility charge on both gas and electric. And we look at all sorts of other tools that we might have to address climate change in Minneapolis. Pollution control annual registrations is another way in which we might be able to address climate change and bring in funding to help mitigate climate change in the city. Our staff in the health department has done a lot of work on evaluating pollution control PCAR fees to be able to use those to charge for CO2 as a pollutant. The legislative directive that was sent to us by Councilmember Wansley was to evaluate additional pollutants that could be added to the 2026 PCAR fee schedule. And so that is what staff in the health department are preparing for, is to do that evaluation, to look at the vast number of customers that might be affected by those charges, to do outreach with those folks that maybe charge those fees. And to just do an evaluation of the program and what the fee charge should be. So our plan is to come back in 2026 with a more thorough evaluation of that.
Thank you, Director Hanlon. That's really helpful.
Thank you.
I have one more question, and this one's probably not for Director Hanlon. This is just in regards to the process of determining this fee schedule increase. I kind of just wanted to get a sense of what was the stakeholder engagement like with property owners, restaurant owners, and making those determinations just a little deeper?
Chair Osman, Councilmember Chowdhury, I would say our process within the finance department, it's evolved a bit in recent years in terms of, I think, how we've grappled and engaged around this subject matter. I think in years prior to last year, because of COVID, it kind of went dormant how we looked at this, because everyone was impacted significantly by what was going on more broadly. And then our lens centralizing this work within finance is really that cost recovery model analysis, and just bringing the fiscal lens of what our financial policies state around what recovery rates shouldn't exceed, but also just doing the analysis to provide the data for decision makers to make a recommendation around what's an appropriate increase. So no direct engagement within the finance department with those who pay the fees, but we engage significantly throughout the year with the departments who implement these fees and with decision makers within the city.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm just going to note for the body, this, as a new member, the license fee schedule is something very, very new to me. I'm going to request a sort of briefing to get a better understanding of this, and for that reason today I'm not comfortable voting in support of it. I'll be abstaining.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to bring something up for our council member, my fellow council members to consider. The rental license fees are going to go up by $236,000. That's going to get passed on to every renter in the city of Minneapolis. So I realize it's only a 5% increase by 98% or 92%, but still we've passed a lot of legislation last time to try and keep renters in their apartments, save them money. And I'll be voting for this. I'm not going against staff recommendation, but I'm being sensitive to these landlords that are being in a position to raise their rents to absorb the cost of these fees.
Thank you. See no one else. I would like to move forward with this council, with full council without recommendation, because later in this meeting we will be receiving a presentation regarding TNC license fee that will give us a fuller picture of the portion of the schedule, and because we might potentially see more amendments coming through on next week's full council meeting. So on that motion, all those in favor say aye.
Excuse me, I was here prepared to speak a little bit about the PCAR fee on carbon dioxide. We signed up, but maybe we signed up under the wrong sheet. Is there another opportunity
No,
to speak?
the public, I'm sorry, the public comment has been closed. I did call if there was anyone speaking. I didn't, but you can submit your comment with city clerk, and we will have it in writing if you have it.
Okay, I'm in favor of the fee for carbon dioxide.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. So with my motion to move this without recommendation of full council, all those in favor say aye. Aye. And those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Our next item is a public hearing for Hiawatha Academy bond issuance. I'll ask Becky Shaw from Seabed Department to give us that presentation. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Osman and members of the committee. I'm Becky Shaw from the Business Development Department of CPED. You have before you today a request to approve and authorize the issuance of up to $50 million in tax-exempt and taxable revenue bonds for Hiawatha ABC and Hiawatha Academies. Hiawatha Academies operates 3 public charter school facilities owned through its real estate entity, Hiawatha ABC, at 3500 East 28th Street, 1611 East 46th Street, and 4646 17th Avenue South, serving elementary, middle school, and high school students. At this time, Hiawatha is requesting the issuance of revenue bonds to refinance outstanding City of Minneapolis Series 2022A and 2022B bonds, to refinance other outstanding debt, to finance some capital improvements, including a new HVAC system and landscaping to the Northrop facilities, and to finance a debt service account and pay for the issuance costs. As with all revenue bonds, the funds for the project will come from bondholders and investors purchasing the bonds, not from the City of Minneapolis. The borrower is responsible for repayment of the bonds with the revenues produced by the project and will not be secured or paid for by the city or any of its assets. And I do have an individual from the project here. And that concludes my presentation, and I will stand for any questions.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I'm going to proceed to open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone who would like to speak on this item. Seeing none, I will move this item for approval. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say nay. The ayes have it and the motion carries. Our next public hearing is for land sale at 2933-2937 Fifth Avenue South Twin Cities Development Company. Welcome, Mr. Ramadan.
Good afternoon, Chair Osman. Committee member property sales program approved by the City Council granting exclusive development rights for 1 year on October 6, 2022, and extended an additional year due to the 2040 plan lawsuit. Staff recommends the sale of 2933-2937 Fifth Avenue South to Twin City Development Company, LLC, for its appraised value of $42,400, subject to conditions. On April the 11th, 1994, the city acquired the vacant parcel at 2933 Fifth Avenue South from the Phoenix Group Incorporated. On February 10th, 2000, the city acquired 2937 Fifth Avenue South from Hennepin County tax forfeited land. Staff has continually marketed this property on the program website since its acquisition to a listserv of now over 7,000 recipients. This is one of only 2 applicants who applied for this piece of property. With combined lots at 2933, 2937 Fifth Avenue South, the purchaser proposes to build a 2-story structure consisting of an international eye clinic on the first level and 4 affordable housing units available to households at or below 60% AMI. The lot size is 86 feet by 119 feet, approximately 10,234 square feet. CPED's construction management staff reviewed the plans and estimates submitted by the applicants and confirmed they are sufficient to meet the minimum new construction standards of the program. Notification was provided to the Phillips West neighborhood on March 22nd, 2022. The neighborhood did not respond. Amanda and Amir, 2 of the emerging developers representing Twin City Development Company, are signed up for the public hearing today and are here to present as well. Are there any questions for me?
Thank you so much, Mr. Ramadan. Yes, I do have a question. I do believe that this land, if I'm not mistaken, went through the Minneapolis Homes program in the past.
That's correct.
And wasn't there a different company that was awarded for the development rights in 2 years?
No, there was another company that also applied, but they also applied for a second parcel that we're looking at. But this is Twin City Development has been the only one that we approved back in 2022.
Oh, 2022. Okay. And then the development will be eye clinic, you say?
Eye clinic first level and then affordable housing above.
Above. Okay.
Yeah.
How many units do we know?
4 units of affordable housing that will be marketed to households at or below 60% AMI.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate you for that presentation. I'm going to proceed to open the public hearing. I'll have the questions at the end. And I'll call Amir. Welcome.
Chair Osman, council member. Yeah, it's we're very excited about this building that's gonna be basically lift up the whole neighborhood. I think it would be helpful. Commercial residential in there is just like a eye clinic for that, and then support for the apartment building on top of it. So yeah, that's all. We're we have been a long time in there. Hope it's all go good. That's good, and we'll be very excited.
I understand there's a church right next to it.
Yes.
That church has been vacant. Do you have any plan or?
We talked to them. We talked to the church, and then we talked to the restaurant if they can kind of join us with all those. But they said no. We're gonna have our own entity. Okay. They don't want to be church anymore, but they want to build something in there. But they don't want to consider this combined with us. So
wonderful. Thank you so much
for
your
course,
comments.
Thank you.
Yep. Amanda. Well, welcome.
Hello, my name is Amanda Deloe, and I work with Amir. We're happy to have made it this far, and we're excited to see this project be in our neighborhood. I have some drawings here. If you haven't seen them yet and have any questions, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, and thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. I see no one else to speak. I'll close the public hearing and just mention that, I want to thank the staff for their work. This has been a property that's vacant in my ward, and we did have some challenges. Encampment has started a few years ago, and I'm glad it's moving forward with that plan. It's really much needed for that kind of services in the area. Yes, Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Ramadan, I just want to thank you for your smart work, but I do have a question of you. You've done this for so long, so many years. You've just been a great employee. Do you have any idea how many units of housing you've helped facilitate? It's got to be a huge number.
Our Minneapolis home staff, I don't have those numbers with us now, but in trying to close that racial wealth gap for BIPOC households, we've seen pretty much an 80% increase in the number of units that we've moved forward in the last 5 to 6 years. But it's not just me, it's our entire staff that's been working on this issue.
Well, I don't mean to single you out, but I will. You're doing a great job, as is the entire staff, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Rainville.
Thank you. I believe I closed the public hearing, but now I'll make a motion to approve this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. And now, our next item is a public hearing for land sale at 2309 Fifth Avenue South to Molina Realtors. Welcome.
Councilman Osman, committee members, this is a sale of another parcel at 2305, 2309 Fifth Avenue South, again through the Minneapolis Homes Property Sale Program approved by the City Council, granting exclusive development rights for a one-year period on October 6, 2022, and extending an additional year due to the 2040 plan lawsuit. Staff recommends the sale of 2305, 2309 Fifth Avenue South to Molina Realtors for its appraised value of $86,400, subject to conditions. On December 18, 2008, the city acquired these vacant parcels from Hennepin County Tax Forfeited Land. Staff has continuously marketed this property to now a list of over 7,000 recipients, and this was the only application received for this parcel. The proposer proposes to invest $3,582,400 in private financing to build a 21-unit, 3-story apartment building with a mix of 1, 2, 3, and 3-bedroom units on these two city-owned combined parcels. The purchaser intends to rent the finished units to households at or below 60% AMI, The combined lot size is 96 feet by 124, approximately 11,904 square feet. Again, CPED's construction management staff has reviewed the plans and has determined that they are sufficient to meet the new construction standards. Again, notification was provided to the Phillips West neighborhood. They did not respond. This developer has previously rehabilitated over 20 vacant city-owned properties, houses, with us, but this would be their first acquisition of vacant land from the city of Minneapolis. Unfortunately, Mr. Molina was unable to be here today for this public hearing, and I would stand for any questions at this point.
Yes, one question.
Yeah.
For me, is there any timeline for the developments from Molina?
He would like to get started as soon as possible. He's got some other projects that are underway, but he's been waiting for this one for about 6 months now. He's got all his plans ready to go and is ready to break ground as well.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Now, I will proceed to open the public hearing. Are there anyone who would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and make the motion to move this item for approval. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Our next item is a hearing regarding a license reunification for Bagu Sushi and Thai Do to outstanding tax owed to Minnesota Department of Revenue. I'll ask City Attorney Joe if there's any updates or explain this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. This is a type of revocation hearing that comes before the council. It's seemingly maybe once or twice a year. They're thankfully pretty rare. It's an operation of a state statute in which the city doesn't have any discretion. That statute requires the city to revoke a license of an establishment if they have an outstanding tax delinquency owed to the State Department of Revenue. If the State Department of Revenue requests us to do so, they have requested us to do so in this scenario. The only way in which the license holder can avoid revocation is to provide what's called a tax clearance certificate, meaning that they've satisfied the delinquency with the state or they've entered into an acceptable payment plan with the state. According to Ms. Lingo from Business Licensing, they've been unable to reach the applicant, although they've provided all the notifications, and they have not received a tax clearance certificate to date. So it would be incumbent upon the city to revoke the business license. If it was the pleasure of the committee, you could move this matter forward without recommendation. Certainly before the council meeting next week, they still have the opportunity, if they are able to resolve the issue. You also could adopt the revocation now, and if they were to provide a clearance certificate, a motion could be made at full council, but that would be the pleasure of the committee. You certainly should open the public hearing or the revocation hearing in case anyone representing the applicant happens to be here and they can speak.
Yep. Thank you so much for that explanation. I'm going to proceed to open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone here to speak on this item. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and call Councilmember Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Osmond. I would move that we move this item without recommendation to the full council. Historically, applicants do come forward with a payment plan and/or not sure clearance certificate, and so would like to provide that opportunity for the small business to bring that forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Jenkins. With that motion to move this item without recommendation, all those in favor say aye.
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 And those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Our next item is an appeal hearing regarding the decision of the City Planning Commission to approve a conditional use permit to allow emergency shelter at 1801 Nicollet Avenue. I'll ask Lindy from CBED Department to give us that presentation.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Lindsay Silas. I'm a senior city planner with CPED Land Use Design and Preservation. The project before you today is a proposed emergency shelter at 1801 Nicollet Avenue. This site consists of 2 parcels. 1801 Nicollet contains a 3-story commercial building with a medical clinic on the first floor and a portion of a surface parking lot. 1800 First Avenue South is a surface parking lot. The building is located at the northwest corner of the intersection of Nicollet Ave and 18th, located in between Nicollet and First. The applicant is proposing to establish a recuperative care facility. If you will recall from the last BIZ meeting, this is the second one that we have seen at this committee in recent meetings. This proposal is for a 64-bed emergency shelter recuperative care facility that would occupy the 2nd and 3rd floors of the existing building. So the City Planning Commission approved the conditional use permit for an emergency shelter for 64 people at its meeting on August 12th, and an appeal was filed on August 22nd by Jacob Softly on behalf of Sentinel Management and Yellow Tree Corporation regarding the Planning Commission's decision to approve that conditional use permit. I won't go too far into this on this presentation since we did cover this at the last meeting with regards to the other facility, but again, this is a recuperative care facility, which is a new license type by DHS. These facilities provide short-term housing to people who have been who need a place to stay after medical illness or procedures. The goal of this type of license is to prevent hospitalizations. This license type requires 24/7 staffing and being overseen by an advanced medical practitioner. And the duration of stay per the license is approximately 60 days, with the facility helping clients find more permanent housing before discharge. Because we don't have a clear recuperative care facility use type in the zoning code, this has been determined to be an emergency shelter. Emergency shelters are conditional uses in every zoning code in the city of Minneapolis except for transportation districts. And these uses, this use type covers any sort of temporary housing for folks where people stay between 24 hours and 6 months. And again, conditional uses are those uses that allow the city to have some additional oversight and review of the use before approval. But as long as the findings for the conditional use permit are met, those conditional use permits are approved unless there are clear documented harms of the use. And again, this is in your quasi-judicial authority where there was a policy decision to allow emergency shelters citywide in almost every single zoning district in the city. So I have some photos here. This is showing the location of the site and the existing building and the layout of the site. Here is the 2nd floor with the proposed improvements and the 3rd floor with the proposed improvements. Staff did hold a meeting with the applicant and other city staff from Fire Inspection Services, Building Code, and the Health Department to review all applicable building and fire codes and licensing regulations that would apply to this proposed use. There were a few issues flagged on the floor plan by building and fire inspections, just with regards to the length of hallways and means of egress, things that the applicant seemed confident at the time that they could make small revisions prior to the building permit being obtained in order to comply. Staff was able to make all 6 legal findings that the proposed use is not going to have a negative impact on the surrounding area, and you can find those in the staff report. There's a few photos here as well. Staff did recommend a condition that the applicant provide landscaping and screening along this corner where there's a lot of parking lot frontage. Currently, there's just an open decorative fence. Staff has recommended a condition that the applicant provide evergreen shrubs in order to better screen that from the public street as required by the zoning code. And staff's recommendation is that the committee deny the appeal, and which would then uphold the approval of the conditional use permit. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We're going to have the questions at the end after the public hearing. And now I am going to proceed the public hearing. I will first allow the applicant 5 minutes to address the committee. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council, committee members, staff. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Jacob Softly. I'm with Larkin Hoffman. I've got Brian Walters with Yellow Tree here. He's going to kick it off with a little testimony.
Can you display the screen there? Hi, Brian Walters here with Yellow Tree. A couple points I want to hit on. Per the 2040 plan, we should not be concentrating homeless individuals and services into our most vulnerable neighborhoods. If you take a look at the map, you'll see within a 2-block radius there are multiple homeless services being provided in this area, which is why we have such a high concentration of homeless people already in this area. This business does not serve the current homeless population. It only adds to it by bringing people from hospitals to this location. We need a city policy that will provide guidance as to where these business types should go. If we don't have it, they'll continue to go in our poorest neighborhoods where the rent is the cheapest, or as the applicant said, a business decision. This will continue to affect predominantly the BIPOC neighborhoods, and the BIPOC businesses will be affected the most, particularly by this application. All of these businesses, which I could only find one that is not a BIPOC-owned businesses, on this corridor. The conditional use permit requirement 2 states that the conditional use will not be detrimental to the orderly development of the area. We are developers. Multiple developers have stated we will not be able to invest in areas where there are a large concentration of homeless people. We are currently trying to negotiate a grocery store lease directly across the street from this, and they're waiting to see how this is going. Would you invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into a new business venture next to a new homeless shelter that's opening up? Residents at our apartments consistently cite homeless issues such as break-ins, thefts, drug use, and sales as to why they are leaving our apartment buildings and why it's detrimental to their lives. Nicollet Corridor is vital to the city. See how much work's being put into Lake and Nicollet right now, and it needs to be protected from uses that discourage development. The application does not meet this requirement.
Okay, and I'll pick up and add some new information that wasn't presented earlier in the application materials, but I was able to find that these recuperative care facilities exist in other states, and by nature, they take patients in and they discharge patients. What we see from the studies that I was able to find is that a very well-run facility still discharges 25 to 40% of its patients back into homelessness. That means that if we have a 64-bed facility with an average stay of 28 days, we're conservatively looking at 200 to 330 homeless people being discharged on the streets in Stevens, Whittier, Loring Heights, right out the front door. We don't have the services to support that community here. It's already overburdened by the homeless population. We also know that mental illness and substance abuse are far more prevalent in the homeless population. This is one of the few areas in the city where the MPD is identified as a drug use hotspot. We're putting patients that have vulnerabilities into this area. Brian didn't touch on it, but this is a goods and services corridor. And that's meant to facilitate neighborhood businesses that connect the community to the resources that they need. He did talk about the expansion of Nicollet through Lake Street, and eliminating the ability to develop this corridor into a meaningful commercial space is going to be a big setback for the community. I also want to touch on the idea that the applicant didn't meet the criteria with regard to integration with the right-of-way. Nicollet Avenue is a bus stop, so I don't know how many pickup and drop-offs they plan to have in front of the bus stop, but that's not an adequate space for it. 18th is metered parking. That's also not an adequate space for pickup and drop-off. Every person coming to and from this facility is either arriving by foot or by bus or by medical transport, and given that it's a referral-based population, they're probably all arriving from transport. The applicant hasn't given us any information about how these people arrive or how they'll depart. The parking lot area on the front side off Nicollet doesn't appear to have adequate space for turning, or if she even has access to use that parking space. Parking lot in the back appears to be gate controlled. It's unclear whether or not transportation services can even access that site. There's no indication about how emergency vehicles will disrupt the neighborhood with pickup and drop-off. We also know that, according to the studies I submitted, that homeless people are 6 times more likely to suffer opioid abuse overdoses. So that is going to burden the emergency response in the neighborhood, then has to deal with that issue. You know, in short, I think we also look at this agenda and we see 2 different items that are for the same use that are following 2 very different paths to approval or denial. At the very least, you should force this applicant to undergo the IUP process and consider the same temporary use conditions for a brand-new use that the city is just learning how to wrap its hands around and understand what the negative impacts actually will be in this community, because there's an enormous discharge of homelessness in other recuperative care centers throughout the country.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And now, next, I will call the applicant to address the committee. You have 5 minutes. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Councilman, and my name is Connie Melchizedek. I am the director of Accord Health, the company that's assuming the building, supposedly. And here I have Bob Kaufman with me. He will be responding to the appeal.
Thank you. My name is Bob Kaufman. An appeal has been made on behalf that recuperative care facility would be harmful to the community and does not meet the 5 findings of fact for conditional use. The reasons presented are based on false misconceptions, misdirection, misinformation, and fearful speculation that do not stand the scrutiny of close review. I did have a handout, you can all follow along with this at the same time. False misconceptions. There is a misconception of what this facility is. Unfortunately, the zoning ordinance categorizes this as an emergency shelter. This immediately brings up the wrong perception of its actual use. Saying emergency shelter to a neighborhood is like yelling fire in a movie theater. The uninformed, fearful response is not in my backyard. This is not an emergency homeless shelter. This is not an emergency. Recuperative care services are for referred individuals already in the care system that need continued care. This is not a shelter. We do not take in people every night to get out of the cold, only to be released in the morning to the streets during the day. This is not residential temporary homeless housing. This is not high-density housing facility as claimed by the appellant. This is not a drug treatment center. This is an institutional inpatient healthcare facility providing recuperative care services to vulnerable members of our community. There would be no qualms if this had a big name like Abbott Northwestern Recuperative Services or Hennepin County's Behavioral Health and Substance Use attached to it, but there's a reason. The appeal level even admits in the closing paragraph that the proposed use is a referral-based medical care facility and not a homeless shelter. There's misconception and misdirection of who the clients are. The biggest concern seems to be with who they are. We do not see opposition to the client base more than the business that will provide needed community service. The focus has been on who the care recipients are instead of the actual use and business. The care recipients are being falsely portrayed as crime-ridden, drug-addicted, undesirable, homeless vagrants with a mission to populate and destroy the local community. Care recipients do just not walk-ins taken off the street. They're already in the care system and referred to the facility. This is not just a crash pad for them to stay at night and go out during the day. Who they are that the community seems so afraid of. They're people who need understanding, compassion, and assistance. Family, somebody's child, brothers, sisters, parents, veterans, someone you may know. They have issues and needs that this facility will help take care of. Oh, running out of time, my goodness. Misdirection. Projecting existing community problems on this CUP is not an excuse for dismissal. Unfortunately, there's already existing problems with gang, crime, and drug dealing. The existing community problems were not created by this CUP. The misconception of demonizing the care recipients exasperating this problem is unsupported false narrative scare tactics. There is no valid argument. This is not the business model. This is not an emergency shelter. It's an inpatient healthcare facility. It's a professional, legal, and legitimate operation. All care recipients are vetted in advance. We do not provide emergency care services. There's 24/7 medical staff, security is on site. This is not a lockdown facility. They're not in a correctional state. They do have the ability to leave during the day to attend needed appointments, take care of personal business, meet with family. And go over the 5 findings. The establishment maintains the operation of the conditional use will not be detrimental. The applicant suggests the use will increase homelessness, crime, and drug use and be detrimental to the neighborhood. This is not addressing the business being addressed, but the business clients. The applicant has not proven a valid standing to support projected problems stemming directly from the CUP. The conditional use, number 2, will be injurious to the enjoyment of property of the vicinity. Similar to number 1, the appellant has not shown valid injury to the use of other properties. The appellant openly states that the appeal allowing the proposal will prevent new housing. There is an ulterior motive for this approach. The housing developer Yellow Tree is part of the appeal group. Yellow Tree has approached the building owner to purchase the property for redevelopment. The developer has a vested interest in killing the CUP and seeing this project fail. They are stroking NIMBY, not in my backyards, for misinformation, using neighborhood opposition to do their dirty work. Number 3, sufficient support in the neighborhood.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Your time is up.
Okay.
Now,
I would ask that you finish reading this.
Appreciate it.
To understand the full response. Unfortunately, 5 minutes wasn't enough to respond to everything that they had to say.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And next, I will allow anyone who sign up for 2 minutes. I'll ask you to keep your remarks focused on the specific conditional use permit, and I'll ask you to be respectful and stay decorum. So, our first speaker is Brian Walter. Oh, he already speak. So, let me see here.
Chair Osmond?
Yes.
Everyone has spoken that is signed up except for Lydia Millard.
Okay, thank you. Lydia, welcome.
Hello, Council. My name is Lydia Millard. I am the new Executive Director for Stevens Square, Loring Heights. I started this position on August 1st, and upon my position, one of the board members of Stevens Square, which is Maureen Wells, found out about this business proposal. The business itself did not reach out to the community. We reached out to them to set up a community meeting on August 5th. On that meeting, we found that there was a lot of gaps and loopholes within their proposal. And at that time, at the meeting, they stated that they would not move forward with the conditional use permit for the Planning Commission meeting that happened on the 12th. We showed up to that meeting anyways, just to make sure. And at that meeting, they presented that they were ready and met all of the requirements of the criteria along with their application. They were granted that approval. We did have to set up another community meeting with them that was actually supposed to take place yesterday. We had a list of community conditions that we wanted to be addressed that wasn't addressed for that August 12th meeting, and the meeting yesterday was canceled. The applicant never agreed to take on the meeting. The applicant never agreed to reschedule the meeting. So we had set up the meeting with no input of whether or not the applicant would show up until the day of. And so coming from the community where this business is looking to be established, the integrity is not there. The trust is not there. Even though the mission of the company is valuable and it is needed, the locations that they have looked at and research has not been thorough. They've only looked at one other location, which is in Bloomington, for their lease, and there are plenty of commercial spaces that are available outside of our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next person is Mike.
Council members, Mike Finkelstein. I'm the managing partner of the building at 1911 Nicollet Avenue, which is just one block to the south. So I spoke at the public hearing, the Planning Commission's public hearing last time around. There's too much to say in too little time. I will just make a couple of very brief comments. The use, one, and these are all kind of at a macro level, the use clearly does not offer any benefit whatsoever to the corridor, to the residents or the businesses. None. Like, no one from the neighborhood, the community, is going to go to the shelter and purchase a service or a product. That's number one. The corridor, the commercial corridor, is meant to be and has always been to be, and with tremendous effort to continue to transform it into a livable corridor. Retail services, commercial services, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think we all know what I'm talking about there. This has no influence on that whatsoever. The use has zero influence. 18th to 19th, for the last 4.5 years, is a known drug haven. It's no secret. We're in the 5th precinct. We are the #1 rated worst intersection in the city, in the entire city, in the 5th precinct. So out of 4 neighborhoods in the city, call it 5, including the north side, we're in that top 5.
Thank you, Mike.
There is zero.
Please wrap it up.
Benefit to that problem by having the use on Nicollet at this location at 1801 Nicollet.
Thank you for
It's
your,
not brain surgery. I mean, it's a fact. It is what it is.
thank you for your testimony. Next person is April Kelly. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is April Kelly. I am an employee of the Stevens Square neighborhood for over 20 years. I was also a former resident of the area. And I just wanted to voice my concerns to oppose the conditional use permit for a proposed emergency shelter at 1801 Nicollet Avenue. While I believe that Minneapolis needs an answer to help the growing population of unhoused people in our communities, this simply is not a great fit. The location that Accord Health Services is seeking for the emergency shelter is not an appropriate location for such services. Already an area hit heavily with crime, gang activity, and open drug use, the facility is not properly equipped or staffed to manage the demographics of our area. We have already experienced how an emergency shelter would impact this area when the city of Minneapolis repurposed the Millennium Hotel back in 2021. It is easy to make decisions about a community without knowing truly what is best, but I urge you as an employee and former resident of the neighborhood to consider a walk on 18th and Nicollet and ask yourself, do I feel comfortable here? Please consider this permit in a different location outside of a community that is already exhausted by its challenges while clinging on to the hope that maybe this is what's necessary to move us forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there anyone who would like to speak on this item? Sir, you already have spoken.
Mr. Chair, the last comment.
No, the
applicant was
comments are
completely
closed.
untrue. I just
You
want
can
that to be
write
clear.
a comment and give it to
Thank
the,
you, sir.
thank you. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing, and now we are using speaker management, if anyone would like to make a comment, but I do have a couple questions with the staff. First question is, the applicant repeatedly say that this is not shelter use. How do we get to the conclusion that this is emergency shelter category? And also, some of the residents and appellant have mentioned that that we should oppose interim use permit instead of conditional use permit. What is the role on that, and what do we play on that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Osman, members of the committee. So there are only a few congregate living type uses in the zoning code. And I believe this came up last time as well, that DHS is always creating new license types, and some of those license types have come into being after even the recent zoning code changes that happened last year. So it is up to the zoning administrator to determine how we define different uses in the zoning code. And this type of thing is happening every single day. So we look at a use, we determine what is it most similar to, and for congregate living type uses and shelters, there are three distinct categories. There's an overnight shelter, which is like a typical shelter where folks are checking in at night and checking out during the day. There is an emergency shelter, which is somewhere that someone might stay for 24 hours up until 6 months. And then there's a state credentialed care facility, which is a place where someone may stay in a congregate living facility for 6 months or more. And given the nature of this use, it's a temporary living. It's focused on folks who are unhoused or homeless. Yes, it does have this medical piece, but there's no definition in the zoning code that's closer than an emergency shelter. So that's how it was determined that this was an emergency shelter. And then the question about whether an interim use permit or conditional use permit is more appropriate, staff has given the applicant two different opportunities at different points along the process to offer them the opportunity to withdraw their conditional use permit application and resubmit an interim use permit application. The applicant declined to do that, and that is within the right. We don't, we are subject to Minnesota Statute 15.99 that we have to respond to the application that is submitted before us. So the applicant has submitted a conditional use permit. They feel confident that they want the permanent approval that comes with a conditional use permit, and they have declined on the opportunities that staff has given them to withdraw and consider an interim use permit instead.
I understand the interim use permit is 5 years long, or is it what the applicant decide or what the staff decide? What is
the maximum?
Interim use? Yeah.
The maximum period of an interim use permit would be 5 years.
5 years.
The approval window for an interim use permit can be shorter, but the maximum would be 5.
Okay, thank you. That's all the question I have, but I do want to make comments on this. This is located in Ward 6, and we are looking at the facts of what's in front of us. This is quasi-judicial. So now, I appreciate everyone who came through to speak. I have spoken both the residents and also the applicant. I think some of the things that have been mentioned here, the struggle of this neighborhood and this section is fact. And also at the same time, the unhoused folks and the crisis we have is also real. So I would like to make the motion to continue this item for next cycle. With that, I will have my council members here in the committee to make their comments on this or ask any question for the staff. Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Councilmember Osman. I would like to ask Attorney Fussy if you can explain what continuing this item for a cycle means in the context of a quasi-judicial hearing and what the limitations are to our actions during this period.
Through the chair, Councilmember Cashman, certainly it's within the authority of this committee to have the public hearing closed and to continue it one cycle. I understand we're within the timeframes that are you were required to make a decision, so that is not an issue. The only issue, or the big issue that would be out there, would be that it's still a pending quasi-judicial matter, and so the committee members or the council members wouldn't be able to be involved in ex parte communications directly with the parties to this matter. Certainly, if it's your intention, you could encourage that the applicant, for instance, have further contacts or further meetings or further communications, and it's possible that you could get a report back from what was said or what occurred or transpired in those meetings, but there would be a prohibition through the quasi-judicial function of council members engaging in direct ex parte communication with the parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Fussy. I think I will try to explain that to my neighbors who are here today in non-legal terms. Is just that Councilmember Osman and I both very much want the applicant to have more conversations with the neighborhood and to look at the conditions that are being proposed and see what solutions can come out of it. Just that Councilmember Osman and I would not be able to be in those meetings with you. And we'd be happy to hear about what comes out of it and what actions we could take 2 weeks from now when this would be back up for a vote, which would be our last opportunity to take action, given the time restraint on taking action on this application. It has to be done 2 weeks from now. So there is a deadline, there's a crunch time. And I'll support his motion to continue this for a cycle.
Thank you, Councilmember Cashman. Councilmember Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Osman. This question is for staff. And I'm curious, are there plans from the zoning administrator to address this issue? This is a new license type from DHS. I anticipate we will likely see more applicants, and then subsequently we will be calling it an emergency shelter, which seems to be at the heart of the challenge with both the applicants that we are discussing today.
Chair Osman, Councilmember Jenkins, thank you for that question. So the state has a number of license types that refer to various types of activities related to assisted facilities, right? So residential care facilities, and there's a spectrum of care that occurs. Our former zoning code attempted to classify those based on the type of licenses or the license names in the state. And what we found was that it was really difficult to keep up with the changing landscape. And so when we adopted our new zoning code, we really tried to move away from naming specific use types and went to use categories. And so in terms of the definition of emergency shelter, this squarely fits within that definition. I think certainly we could discuss about whether the name of that category is correct or not in terms of describing what it is. But in terms of the legal definition, I think we are not concerned that this has been misclassified or that if we had a different zoning classification, the outcome would be any different. I think policy direction has been to broadly allow these types of facilities throughout the city, and that has been the direction. So while this is a new license type within the umbrella of assisted facilities that the county and the state offer, I think generally speaking, it's in line with the intent of the ordinance and fits within the classification of that definition.
Yeah, I anticipate that whatever community a entrepreneur decides to locate their business, we're going to have the same challenges.
Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Chair Osman. Meg, I do have one more question for you, Director McMahon. Did the Department of Health Services provide any guidance about these new license type, about what type of zoning is ideal for location of these facilities?
Chair Osman, Councilmember Cashman, no, I think when we, so when the state or the county is working through this, I think zoning is probably the furthest thing from their mind or near to. So they're looking at it purely from a public health perspective, what the licensing criteria are related to, the professional credentials of the folks on site and how many people and how, the kind of the operation of that facility. And they really leave it up to local control in terms of where those facilities can be sited. Mm-hmm. And so when we look to our Minneapolis 2040 plan and and then the subsequent zoning that came out of that, the policy direction from council was to allow really the category of assisted living facilities, which this falls under, relatively broadly within the city. So emergency shelters are permitted use in all zoning districts. There is some additional regulations that go along with that in terms of performance standards, hence the requirement for the conditional use permit, but they are permitted.
Thank you for that explanation. Do we have a history of doing any proactive site searching for shelters, as in the city actually identifies locations where shelters should be and then puts that out to providers as options?
I guess since you're looking over in this direction,
Chair Osmond, Councilmember Cashman, we do site selections for businesses from time to time. We do not do site selections for shelters. They come to us looking for where they want to be.
Okay, thank you. I do think that the city and the county should together collaborate more on identifying sites for shelters. There's a huge need in our community. I mean, you saw the council rearrange our budget last week to find $1.5 million to keep an agate shelter open because there is such a need for shelters in our community, and the siting is always very difficult because of all the conditions in the neighborhood and the way of trying to get folks into that facility and for emergency vehicles, et cetera. So I just think that the city and the county should try to be more proactive in working together to identify. I mean, there are a lot of vacant buildings in our community that could be ID'd for that.
Councilmember Chowdhury.
Thank you, Chair Osman. I did want to ask a question of Accord Health in this public forum to avoid any ex parte communication, just about a clear understanding on a point that was made by them on coordinating transportation once a patient is done at the facility. The applicant stated in their comments, they're like, people are just going to be put out into the streets, and that doesn't appear to be the truth in what we're hearing. So a better understanding of what that process looks like in terms of patients leaving the facility.
So the patient leaving the facility, the coordination starts from admission. We do have a system where as soon as someone is admitted, we start talking about where they're going to go from there, because one of our goals is not to dismiss you into the streets. We need you to find permanent housing. So one of the things we're doing is we're trying to figure out, do you have, let's say, mental health issues? Because some of our people on the streets do have, that's a prevalent situation. If that's the case, we know so many places where you could be rerouted to, maybe like an arts facility, intensive residential treatment center. Could it be a group home where you need to be? I happen to know it's tens, if not hundreds, of group homes that are shutting down because they don't have clients. Those are places we can channel patients to. We could be a referral point for those places. Even just getting them in touch with case management, where someone in case management is following up with these patients or these guys on the street to figure out where they're going to go next. There's also a Minnesota Department of Health housing service that we're also applying for, where we will be able to apply for housing for these patients, for these people. Other than that, if they come in and choose not to partake in all of the above, we do have transportation to transport them to their point of first contact or familiar place where they started. Because most of them are not looking for a new place to camp out. They usually have places where they are, where they have families and friends, where they're familiar with. Those are places where we would be sending them back to.
Thank you. Through the chair, if it's all right. In terms of the people who are patients that are your clients, how are they usually referred? Is it usually through Hennepin County? Is it through the state? Like, what's
All
their
of the
touch
above.
point?
It's through Hennepin County, state, clinics, physicians from the hospital. Most of them are coming from doctors where they're sick and they need some help. They cannot recuperate from the street. A lot of them are suffering from, let's say, HIV, they have TB, they have different things where they need to recuperate. Like somebody who has, let's say, TB, they go to the hospital. That's where they would be treated to begin with to get rid of it. But there's a huge amount of time needed to recuperate from that, where they're not infectious or a threat. They're not they don't have communicable disease threats anymore, but need to recuperate somewhere where it's warmer, let's say in December, they cannot do well on the streets because they go back to the street 1 week later, they're back in the hospital or dead. So.
Thank you. I asked that question just to kind of get an understanding of how individuals that are clients of yours are already within the continuum of care, right?
Yeah.
They are already actively seeking out and accepting services.
Correct.
And then the service provider that is charged with Health and Human Services for us in the city of Minneapolis is Hennepin County. So these are individuals that have already been offered different types of services, accepted them, and are kind of moving through the continuum of care process.
Correct.
And just for the public record, right, like when we're talking about individuals who are unhoused in encampments, they're oftentimes at the very starting point of the continuum of care. They may
Right.
have been offered services, maybe accepted some, or maybe they're getting assessed, or maybe it's taking longer and multiple
Correct.
touches for them to accept a service. And so the client base we're talking about are individuals already participating, moving through continuum of care, and then there sounds like a goal of getting people to the next step of housing through this coordinated work with Hennepin County. So I just kind of wanted to get a better picture of this specific base of individuals. So thank you for answering those questions.
Thank you. Seeing no one else to speak, with my motion to delay this item and continue this item, all those in favor say aye.
Excuse me, Chair, I just have one last question for the applicant.
Okay.
Are you currently operational? Are you doing business now?
Or just in general? Like in sites? Okay.
Yeah, do you have other sites that you're operating now?
I actually have a group home that I operate. It's very different from what we're talking about right now. But,
So this is a new endeavor?
I'm sorry, what?
This is a new endeavor?
Yes, it is. But similar in a way that these people are going to need medical care, nursing care, which we're already doing, which I do. We take care, and I've taken care of a lot of people in the group homes where I work, where we've taken in a lot of homeless people. So I imagine it's not going to be any different.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Now, with that motion, to continue this item for next cycle, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it and the motion carries. All right, next item is a discussion. We will now move on to our discussion item. First is a conditional use permit for 918 West Lake Street. This item was continued from our last meeting to allow applicant time to meet with the community stakeholders. We have already had the presentation and public hearing, and on this matter, are there any questions and discussion from the council members? Seeing none, I will make the motion to approve this item. Yep, I'll make the motion first vote to approve this item. Councilmember?
Thank you, Chair. Is there the applicant in here? Yeah, I don't.
Yep, he's here.
So thank you for your outreach to the community. That's much appreciated. And I noticed there were some recommended motions or conditions to place on that. I wonder if the staff could go through that, please.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Chair Osmond, Councilmember Rainville. So the applicant provided a summary of the community meeting with the neighboring businesses that had been recommended at the last BIZ hearing on September 10th. And staff prepared a memo just with some potential recommended conditions up to the council members, whether you are interested in applying those. Those are related specifically to some of the commitments that the applicant made in that community meeting. So if you look at the memo, the new recommended conditions are numbers 4 through 6. And I can read those if that would be helpful.
Please.
Number 4, the applicant shall work with staff to add skylights to the facility to enhance natural light and create a more conducive recovery environment for clients as allowed by the building code. Number 5 is that the facility shall maintain a 1-to-8 ratio for both security and nursing staff. And number 6 is that the applicant shall appoint a community liaison officer who will serve as the primary contact for local businesses and residents. And the contact information for said officer shall be posted in an area that is visible to the public. Those were conditions that were drafted based on the notes provided by the applicant related to some of the concessions and promises they had made in that meeting.
Councilmember.
So thank you. So I would move this forward with those recommended conditions,
Yes.
item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, for the interim use permit.
All right. Councilmember Cashman.
No, I was just going to motion to
Thank
add
you.
those conditions to it as well. I'm not sure that we need to take it as a separate
didn't
vote,
see
though.
it. You're right. Thank you. Thank you for that, Councilmember Rainville and Cashman. Seeing no one else to speak. The motion to move forward, to approve this item with the conditions to move forward on the council. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say nay. The ayes have it and the motion carries. All right. Our next item is an exclusive tobacco dealer license with operation condition for High Five Tobacco. This item has been continued twice from previous meeting. Are there any questions or discussions from the committee members? Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Chair Osman. So in the time between when this business application for a tobacco license came before the committee, which is now a month ago, my office and the community members have been pursuing almost every possible angle to see what else could be possible on this site other than a tobacco store, such as a grocery store or even a food truck. And while I respect and appreciate that the applicant in this case, who's investing in Loring Park by opening a new business, is not responsible for what took place on this site before, it can't be ignored that the former Speedway location has been the epicenter of neighborhood trauma for years. And so we can't penalize this new business owner, but I will say the building owner, Income Realty LLC, continues to be completely absent, unhelpful, and really unwilling to engage in solutions to this site. That could be, changing the curb cut, it could be changing fencing structures, it could be allowing for a grocery store here, it could be allowing for other uses. But I did find out that 7-Eleven has a non-compete agreement, so they will not allow the applicant to open a grocery store on this site, which was his original intention. Also, this building is zoned as Downtown 1, so a tobacco store is legally allowed, and the rules around a mandated distance from other tobacco shops does not apply. So taking all of this into account, thank you, Manager Amy Lingo, for working really hard to set conditions on the business license and working with the applicant to explain the conditions that would be on their license, including safety, security, cleanliness, orderliness from customers and staff. And just given the trauma that's happened on this site in the neighborhood for years, there is a deep distrust from community that these conditions will be upheld. So there's not a lot of options before us anymore about denial, because they have a legal right to explore this business use at this site. But I really, really ask the staff to uphold the conditions in this license, and we can work together on that. The applicant has been collaborative, willing to meet. The precinct police officers met with the business owner, also signed off on their safety plan, and I will keep trying to push on this non-compete agreement, because I do not think 7-Eleven should have the right to stop grocery stores from opening up in our neighborhoods. We don't have a Speedway in Loring Park. The closest one is in Uptown, off Lyndale, and so they're really just preventing affordable food from being available to Loring Park residents. But that's not really within the city's control right now, so I'm trying to get a meeting with Attorney General Keith Ellison to see what we might be able to do there. With that, all that being said, I want to communicate to my community that I'm not acquiescing in this case of allowing for negative activity to resume in this location. And although I understand that this applicant has a legal basis for this license, I will be abstaining from voting on this today.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Cashman. We do have the speaker management. I have my name up. I want to thank the staff for their really time spent here and meeting, and also Councilmember Cashman's leadership to bring the applicant and also resident. We understand the concern of the resident, and at the same time, the business side of it also has the legal to establish this facility. So with that, I will make the motion to approve this item and forward it to the full council. And now I'll call Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious what the, under the business licensing operating conditions, if Ms. Lingo, if you could explain the hours of operation, please.
Chair Osman, Councilmember Rainville, the hours of operation are set forth based on the zoning, which they could be open until 1 a.m., but they have agreed to match the hours of operation for the rest of the mall, which would have them closing at, I believe, 11. So it's not a condition, it's more of that's what they have agreed to in their business plan.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. And just for the rest of the committee, I'm going to be voting no on this because I can't see the community benefit for this. I don't think this is going to improve that neighborhood. I'm willing to take the heat on that vote. But should it go forward, I fully support Councilmember Cashman in that we have to impose these conditions. That is a very, very disruptive part of downtown. And as we strive to do all these good things to bring downtown back, we can't have that bad behavior there. And if these conditions will help mitigate that, which everyone feels they should, they definitely have to be enforced, as Councilmember Cashman said. So again, I will be voting no on this today.
Thank you. With the motion to approve this item, I will ask clerk to call the roll, if that's okay.
Councilmember Rainville.
No.
Cashman.
Abstain.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Chowdhury.
Aye.
Chair Osman.
Aye.
There are 3 ayes, 1 nay, and 1 abstention.
Thank you. That motion carries. And now, our next item is presentation regarding TNC fees. I'll welcome Director Amy Lingo. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Osman and committee members. I'm Amy Lingo, Manager for Licenses and Consumer Services, and today I'm presenting the Transportation Network Company's legislative directive response. Just pardon me while I move all of this stuff around. First off, the legislative directive components: a fee study of business licensing fees for transportation network companies, TNCs, to reflect how recent industry changes impact expense and revenue estimates. A fee study should be based on the 95% recovery ratio and align with all relevant financial policies. And 2, proposed tiered fee levels for the TNC of different sizes. So now to address question 1. In this legislative directive requesting a fee study of the business licensing fees for TNCs, the fee study is based on the 95% ratio. So we're going to do the fee study based off of that ratio so we can align it with the best practices and our financial responsibilities. As everyone is aware, licenses are meant to be a cost recovery model. If you look at the takeaways for the industry changes that we have that are still in effect, and they're undetermined to be, we are unable to define the impact of the current changes that we went through for the compensation rates. We cannot define how those have made an impact on the policy at this time. We cannot measure that policy, so as a result, the fee study was conducted based off of the 2023 expenses and revenue data. What is a fee study? Before getting into the results of the fee study, we're going to go over a brief recap of exactly what a fee study entails. Fee studies are guided by financial policies and state statute. Section 3.5 of the city's financial policies regarding license, permit, and user fees state that a city may implement charges, but said charges may not exceed the cost of providing services. A fee study is a tool to ensure revenue collections do not exceed the cost of enforcement. It provides a comparison of revenues and expense. The end product is a recovery ratio, which is calculated by dividing revenue over expenses. Per the financial policies, the recovery ratio may not exceed 100%. Furthermore, when you're grappling with operations supported by fees, such as TNC, the recovery ratio is on a relatively higher end. From the finance perspective, it is advisable and a matter of common practice to target recovery ratios closer to 90 to 95%. A 90% target provides sufficient buffer in the event of fluctuating expenses and or revenues from year to year. When we look at the analysis and findings, it is important to note that actual fiscal year 2023 results were used, as shown on the slide. On the left of the slide, the table breaks down the total of expenses, including base departmental expenses and other city expenses, resulting in total expenses of $48,417. On the right slide, the TNC total revenues collected amount to $93,640. Based on these components, the recovery ratio results is 193%. Because the city is over-collecting, we modeled the fee levels under the status quo to produce recovery ratios at 80, 85, 90, and 95%, so the city is in compliance of the financial policies. You can see in this chart here our various options. There is a decision point for the committee and council to decide how and if it wants to reduce both the license fee and the wheelchair surcharge fee. The committee and council must consider if it wants to implement a flat wheelchair surcharge fee or incrementally change both the license fee and the surcharge to meet the decrease in the license fee. Additionally, the city will need to consider if certain companies that meet our accessibility requirements will get discounted or no surcharge fee at all, and how will that variance impact the recovery ratio considerations. In 2024, there is also additional TNCs in the market that significantly change some of these considerations. These are all takeaways that should be considered when setting the appropriate rate. Based on the information that we have before us, we are recommending a 95% recovery license fee under Plan A in order to incentivize the wheelchair program. For example, if the company creates their own wheelchair program, they will not need to pay the $10,615 as proposed. But if they are not able or not interested in creating a wheelchair program, we'll be able to use that larger amount to incentivize a wheelchair program to be created and paid for in the taxi industry. In response to question 2 of the legislative directive, we have identified 3 categories of tiered fee levels based on sizes of TNC companies. A small company, as defined, would probably be 100 or few drivers. Medium, less than 500 drivers, but more than 1,000. And a large company, 500 or more. That was a typo. 101 to 500 for the medium, and then more than 500 for a large. If such a structure is preferred to be created, it will require ordinance change regarding licensing the drivers. This would be necessary to ensure that companies are licensed at the correct tier. Some takeaways: staff time. When we are doing our recovery and the workload, staff time is the initial application approval. It takes quite a bit of time for a TNC. It's a very complicated license with very complicated insurance and requirements. Annually, there's the renewal review process, and we are complaint-driven and with the progressive enforcement. Additionally, if a driver ordinance has to be created, that will increase staff time and workload for both inspectors and administrative staff. Fee levels, the tier fee levels, if that protocol is to go forward, would be proportional based off of the structure. And the impact on driver numbers is unforetold at this time. We do not have enough data to be able to make any information about how any of this would impact the number of drivers until we get into it. That is my presentation, and I stand for any questions or comments.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Are there any questions from the council members? Seeing none, I will ask, oh, wow, it popped up right away. Councilmember Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Osmond. Ms. Lingo, thank you for that presentation. Appreciate it. Are TNC drivers subject to license fees in other jurisdictions as well? I know there's an airport fee, but I'm just curious.
Through the chair, Councilmember Jenkins.
Bloomington, Golden Valley, do they pay fees in those jurisdictions?
That is a good question. It depends on the jurisdiction. I do not believe that St. Paul licenses the drivers individually. That's one of the reasons why the fee structure was created the way it was, so that the drivers were covered under the main license and they were the responsibility of the licensee. There are municipalities out there that do license drivers individually, such as Washington. There are other places that do. I don't know of any that do locally.
Thank you. Beyond the airport? Or
beyond the airport.
Yes. Yeah, great, thank you.
Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Chair Osmond. Thank you for the presentation. Do we structure fees according to amount of employees for other business fees, licensing fees in the city?
Chair Osmond, Councilmember Cashman, that is correct. For the short-term rental platform, we do have a very similar structure where we license the platform itself in business licensing. So for example, Airbnb gets the main license through us, and then the individual units have rental licenses through regulatory service process. And that is how we maintain that they are at the proper level because we balance the number of units licensed along with the company itself.
Thank you. And do we use the same amounts of employees, the three categories that you listed for that license type as well?
That is where the initial results came from, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll ask clerk to receive and file that presentation. And now we are on our last item. Our next item is presentation related to addressing homelessness through the establishment for safer outdoor space. I'll ask Sarah Renner from the City Audit Office for that presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Osmond, council members. On May 14th, this committee directed the Policy and Research Division to conduct a landscape analysis of municipalities with safe outdoor spaces and also identify changes that may be necessary to enable safe outdoor spaces here in Minneapolis. The landscape analysis was presented to this committee on July 23rd, and today I'm presenting the findings of the second part of this report, focused on what has been done and could be done here in Minneapolis to establish safe outdoor spaces. So first, some background, status of homelessness here in Hennepin County. According to the official HUD Coordinated Point-in-Time Count, or PIT count, the number of persons experiencing homelessness in Hennepin County has increased by 24% from 2022 to 2023. This increase was driven in part by a significant rise in the number of families experiencing homelessness. In 2023, both the Pitt and Wilder Foundation counts found a small decrease in the number of persons experiencing unsheltered homelessness. According to both counts, the number of unsheltered persons in Hennepin County more than doubled between 2015 and 2018. And the number of persons living unsheltered has remained at this higher level since that increase. Nearly 86% of Hennepin's total homeless population are in shelters, and compared with other major cities, that's a relatively high proportion. Between 2021 and 2023, Hennepin County's chronically homeless population has declined by nearly 36%. It's now at 315 persons, and reducing this population has been the county's focus. Who's experiencing homelessness? As a part of its homelessness study, the Wilder Foundation interviewed in October 2023 almost 700 adults living in shelters and 585 persons experiencing homelessness in non-shelter locations in Hennepin County. The results of this very robust study paint a picture of who's experiencing homelessness in Hennepin. Just a few, I'm just going to read a few of the stats. 85% of those experiencing homelessness identify as Native American or person of color. 48% report having a chronic health condition. And of those who spent the last at least 15 of the last 30 days unsheltered, outside of a shelter, 77% report a serious or chronic disability. 52% report having been turned away from a shelter. 47% report chemical dependency. So I spoke with a range of homeless service providers about their work as well as the proposal for a safe outdoor space in Minneapolis. The Minneapolis's own provider, the homeless response team, is composed of 2 to 4 persons within regulatory services, and they respond to homelessness-related complaints on 311 and elsewhere, and they track encampments across the city. Through referrals, they connect unsheltered people to needed services. In the last 2 years, they've engaged well over 4,000 people living in encampments. And the observations from staff included there have been a growing number of larger encampments in South Minneapolis, and staff more frequently encounter squatters, people living in vehicles in the near north area. I also spoke with colleagues at Agate, Avivo Simpson, and the American Indian Community Development Corporation. All pointed to a surge in substance use disorder, this reflecting the opioid epidemic. Regarding safe outdoor spaces, all noted the importance of early engagement with service providers and people experiencing homelessness. Outreach staff at Agate noted the difficulty of reaching people who live in cars, given their extreme mobility. They noted the importance, therefore, of the potential importance of safe parking spaces, and mentioned the potential for amnesty from parking regulations to prevent cars serving as dwellings from being towed. Colleagues at Agate and Avivo noted the importance of location and community to a subpopulation who live in encampments, and thus their resulting reluctance to travel to shelters. I spoke with the Hennepin County Office to End Homelessness to examine shelter capacity. As of mid-April of this year, Hennepin County contracted shelters for single adults was at 92% of capacity, space for youth at 86% capacity, and for families it was at 261% capacity. And this is because the county guarantees shelters for all families. And so once existing capacity is exhausted, they procure additional space and staff. 4 months of adult shelter data revealed that most days and nights there was space available, with some exceptions for single adults experiencing homelessness. In 2023, adults were turned away from shelters 4,000 times, either because everything was booked or because the person had a past rule violation. In 2022, 7,000 adults were turned away from shelters. The county credits this decrease in turning people away to their investment in case management. From 2021 to 2023, the number of people leaving homelessness and finding permanent housing increased in the county by 57%, and that has freed shelter beds. The demand for family shelter has increased the county's spending considerably. Since the pandemic, the county's spending on homelessness grew from about 15 million a year to 50 million a year. Federal ARPA funds covered a large part of the increase, and the expiration of those funds in 2025 puts the existing shelter system at risk. The county estimates that about 12 million in funding is needed to maintain a Vivo Village and Homeward Bound shelters, 24/7 shelter services, and case management. So Minneapolis has experience has had experience with a safe outdoor space in the form of the Heading Home Navigation Center in 2018, 2019. In 2018, the city committed to housing those at the encampment on Franklin and Hiawatha. The numbers subsequently swelled, making it one of the largest encampments in the country. The city responded by leasing land from Red Lake Nation, 2 blocks from the encampment. Sprung structures were established, providing congregate shelter for what ended up being around 175 people. The city provided at that time for insurance and liability coverage. Restrooms, showers, cafeteria, meetings were provided in heated trailers. Simpson Housing Services led the Navigation Center operations, working with the city, county, and a whole range of agencies. And Simpson noted that some issues arose around finding space for people's belongings. There were initial security concerns, and Simpson staff noted a kind of a chaotic atmosphere. 25 clients were exited from the Navigation Center for violating the Code of Conduct. And after this, Simpson explained that operations began working more smoothly. Staff to guest ratio at this point was high and continued to increase to about 1 in 20. Compared with running a traditional shelter, Simpson staff noted the need to deal to a greater extent with people's trauma in this setting. The total cost for startup and operation of the center for 6 months was $3 million. The initiative resulted in 100 clients moving into permanent housing. Those rehoused had a slightly lower success rate, but 80% success rate still in terms of staying in their homes compared to the normal 90%. A Vivo Village opened in 2020 specifically to provide an alternative to those living in encampments. It has a closed referral process whereby it works with outreach teams and providers to identify those living unsheltered who are not using the traditional shelter system. Avivo has private lockable dwellings for 100 guests. It takes a harm reduction approach that includes on-site, safer, and managed drug use. Approximately 40% of Avivo's 555 clients have been placed in permanent housing. Clients stay an average of 100 days. There are wide reports of a large demand for Avivo-style shelter, but there's no central waiting list, so I wasn't able to verify that. To make safe outdoor spaces legal in Minneapolis would require amending the city's maintenance code to allow for a licensed exception. City parking rules may also be amended to allow sleeping in vehicles in safe outdoor spaces. The intentional community and cluster development ordinance in the city's that's existing in the city's zoning code allows for a land use that's akin to safe outdoor spaces. Intentional community cluster developments are operated by a nonprofit, government, or healthcare agency. Under the ordinance, tiny homes or prefabricated structures can be used for dwelling units and separate shared spaces for bathroom and kitchen needs. The ordinance could be amended to account for anticipated limitations and risks posed specifically by safe outdoor spaces, or the city may wish to create a new ordinance. Depending on what type of structure would be allowed in safe outdoor spaces, the city would need to ensure compliance with state fire, building, and residential codes. If the city decides to move forward with safe outdoor spaces, the report suggests a range of considerations based on other cities' examples. Experience suggests the importance of having a shared and clear sense of purpose from the outset. To this end, thought might be given to whether the purpose is A, to improve the immediate conditions and prospects of people experiencing homelessness, which is the case for the Navigation Center, or if it is to create a sort of longer-term community that helps people experiencing homelessness to transition back to society. And that's more the Avivo example, as well as a lot of the spaces researched in my first report. A space where people stay for a longer period of time, like 100 days, might need more substantial dwellings, like tiny houses and more sophisticated arrangements for running water and waste management. A space modeled as a transitional step, however, might have less substantial dwellings, but would require greater investment in service delivery, including a higher ratio of caseworkers to get residents into housing. The scope of any safe outdoor space can be defined by considering the target audience. Safe outdoor spaces might narrowly target a subpopulation of those living inside of encampments for whom the existing shelter is not an option. Or safe outdoor spaces might alternatively be conceived as a way to expand existing low barrier harm reduction shelter more broadly. So collaboration with the county is another key component. Hennepin County Office of Housing Stability contracts with almost all of the shelter providers in Minneapolis. They set requirements and undertake performance management, monitoring, and oversight. The county also works to connect people in shelter with services, and they manage the Shelter Connect services. Other cities' research for this report have established some sort of collaborative arrangements with the county to manage and operate safe outdoor spaces. A clear division of labor in Portland, for example, enabled the city to establish within the city a team of about 5 people who help manage and operate Portland's villages. They have 6 villages serving around 1,000 people. The division of labor in Portland is based on existing capacity and expertise. So the city identifies sites, procures structures, oversees community engagement. The county recruits site operators, oversees shelter operations, and ensures connections with appropriate providers. Last slide. Some considerations in thinking about an ordinance can be broken up by the type of space. So in thinking about an outdoor village type space, the city would need to set licensing requirements, establishing what would be required for an operator to apply for a license and under what conditions it would be revoked. They did this in Tacoma, for example, by authorizing the director of planning to issue permits for outdoor shelters only upon demonstration that all public health and safety considerations have been adequately addressed, and to revoke permits if the city determines the site is unfit for human habitation based on health-related concerns. Permits in other cities typically are for 1 year, and they have the option to renew based on successful operation. Specifics around licensing would need to be developed in consultation with the city's planning, development, and licensing staff. Other cities' ordinances that legalize safe outdoor spaces also typically name and define the village space, and some set operational and physical parameters. Tacoma, again, their ordinance notes that at a minimum, all sites should have a perimeter fencing, garbage services, bathrooms, electricity, portable water. Portland requires case management, housing support, first aid, and medical care. Those are the kind of parameters. Several cities require the operator to be on site whenever there are occupants and to have acceptable liability insurance, including in some cases to indemnify the landowner. The Minneapolis Health Department advised that bathrooms in any safe outdoor space should be as proximate to sleeping quarters as possible with a well-illuminated route and staff on hand. They note that poor site maintenance can cause health dangers, and they recommend requiring a backup plan in case of severe weather. Ordinances define the types of structures that are acceptable in village-type outdoor spaces, specifying tents, tiny homes, and/or portable structures, also known as prefabricated homes. If tents are considered in the Minneapolis case, the health department should be consulted on potential health implications. Some cities set out in ordinance requirements for safe outdoor spaces to be a certain distance from residents and from public transportation and potentially schools. Some cities set limitations on who can stay in the space and who can visit. Portland's safe rest villages by ordinance are only for those persons residing in high-impact encampments, for example. And finally, some cities require community engagement by ordinance. And in terms of the land and service provider, if requested, both CPED and Public Works indicated they could help identify potentially appropriate city land, given some parameters and some lead time because it's a labor-intensive activity. In regard to identifying a service provider, late last year, city staff inquired with trusted service providers about the potential for an interim indoor space / navigation center. And at the time, all of these service providers were either unable or unwilling to engage. Other cities' ordinances legalizing safe outdoor spaces are typically inclusive of safe parking, but they elaborate specifically that sleeping in a vehicle is legal when part of a safe outdoor space. Specific licensing requirements can be added for operators of safe parking spaces, such as ensuring that cars are operable, that they work. Other considerations around safe parking raised in the report include the potential for amnesty and also some practical considerations around winter months. In Duluth, they only have safe parking in the summer, and that comes with some limitations that are laid out in the report. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much for that presentation. And now I'd like to recognize Councilmember Chavez has joined the committee. Are there any question or comment from council members?
Mr. Chair, I have to excuse myself. I have a 4 o'clock Zoom meeting with Public Works, so I apologize, but I have to leave.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Osmond, and I too have a 4:20 appointment that I have to get to, but just clarify, potentially these intentional communities could exist now if operators were willing to do it. Am I misunderstanding your report?
The maintenance code currently makes it illegal to sleep overnight in a vehicle or to have the tent structures are. So it would need to be amended to make the safe outdoor space legal.
I don't have the presentation in front of me, but I thought there was a section that churches and/or other entities could operate an intentional community.
Right. Intentional communities are, yes. Those are legal for permanent housing at the moment. So the Envision community is the example of an intentional cluster development it's underway. It's in works right now. And that's the reason I think that ordinance was put into place. So yes, it is potentially legal now under that ordinance, but there are some areas of the maintenance code that may need to be clarified further for a safe outdoor space, especially safe parking, because it's explicitly illegal to sleep overnight in a vehicle in Minneapolis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council members, I just want to remind you that we have to do a hard stop at 4:05, so we don't lose quorum. We can always bring this item for discussion, but I do want to recognize Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Chair Osman, and thank you to our staff for this presentation, for all the work that you all are doing, communicating with different service providers and different organizations across the country. I don't really have any questions. I'd just like to make a few comments of why we're pursuing these actions, but I think there's been 2 reports on this. On one of them, it noted that 85% of people living in their car in Duluth Safe Bay program regularly met with caseworkers. That is a really positive thing, that if you're able to have unhoused residents access services, and this is a really good number, I think that is something that is worth trying in Minneapolis. And then on a different report, I received that the Colorado Safe Park Initiative, 43% of the 240 households living in vehicles served in 2023 moved on to positive housing, which included moving into permanent housing or moving in with families or friends in a permanent in tenure. So those are data points that we got from PAR regarding these initiatives. I think it also talked about a potential price. The one in Duluth cost $150,000 and how they approached it. And then additionally, when it came to safe outdoor spaces, which is separate from safe parking, from March 2020 to March 2023, I believe, more than 170 people moved into permanent housing from a safe outdoor space location in Denver. Those are positive numbers. I think if we're able to establish a program like this in Minneapolis, being careful in our approach, but that is data-backed and human-centered, if we can get that many more people off the street and into permanent housing, that is something we should be trying in the city of Minneapolis. And I guess my invitation to all our colleagues in the BIS committee, because I'm not a member of this committee, is to reach out to my office, reach out to Councilmember Chowdhury, reach out to Vice President Chugtai. We will be introducing a safe parking initiative soon, which is separate from the Safe Outdoor Space Ordinance. The Safe Outdoor Space Ordinance component has already been introduced back in the beginning of the year. And at some point, we're going to be giving direction to our city attorney's offices to start drafting both these policies as we begin the legislative process. So that's information for all of you to know. We're open invitation to reach out to our offices before we begin that process, just so you all are involved in this process. There's also funding issues of how to fund it. That's a different conversation too, but just wanted to make those comments today.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Chavez. Councilmember Chowdhury.
Thank you, Chair Osman. I am going to hold off in asking my questions, and I will meet with you one-on-one, but I did want to say thank you for putting together both of the reports and doing the research and presenting it to us. This has been very helpful, so just wanted to give a credit to you for presenting before our committee now twice, and then our entire policy and research team. This is just really helpful in us, like, kind of looking at, okay, this is the different steps that we have to take in order to move forward on this. And I'll echo what Councilmember Chavez said. If colleagues have any questions, please reach out. Let's start having the conversations early.
All right, thank you so much. We still do have a quorum, so I want to ask clerk to file a receipt for those presentations. So thank you so much, and see no further business before us. With no objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned.